This is update for October 2022, day 239 of the war, end of the date update. So today is a pretty uneventful day, to be honest, and it's going to be a very short video. Just few points in terms of general, like strategic economy-wise situation is. Uh, Two things is the interest rates are rising pretty quickly in the U.S., which is shown like measured by treasuries, which is U.S. government borrowing from the investors. So 10-year treasury reached sort of recent new high, 4.22%, and uh, the, it has been rising pretty quickly past several days, and uh, probably we're getting to the point that there could be some fireworks if it continues in the financial markets, if it continues rising like that. So again, and it's gonna put a lid to extent on the prices of commodities. But as discussed, it will cost a lot um, in terms of employment, basically in the economy. Now let's actually look at Germany, where the producer price index was at extremely high level. I think it was 45.8%. What this really means, what this producer price index is essentially prices of the producers, right? Right. So they make the goods, and then they go to wholesalers, and then they go to retailers, and then you know final consumers are buying them. So this really what this kind of means is, and it's the same, exactly the same number as it was in August, and before August the numbers were lower. So first of all, it was driven essentially by energy, right? The cost of energy, that's what's driving this number. And what this also means that this inflation from the producers, from the produced goods, it will go through the system first to wholesalers, then to retailers, and then the consumers will see it through consumer price index, which is going to be also very high. So don't know what's the lead time before it reaches actual CPI and consumer, but probably months or two, maybe like 3 months at most. So so it looks like the uh, peak in inflation in, let's say, continental Europe or Germany specifically has not been reached as measured by consumer price index, because that's the main um, sort of main metric that's being used to estimate inflation by central banks, and then based on that they basically raise or reduce interest rates and so on. But in this case, obviously they've been raising interest rates. So I believe the last CPI for Germany was 10%, and so this means that there is a chance that there will be CPI read of 12, 13% in Germany in the coming months before the year end, which will put European Central Bank is in even worse situation when they need to hike, but the economy is so in such a bad shape that if they do it, it will totally create huge fireworks as well. And so they try not to do, which is kind of in theory, I mean, it's not sort of the best strategy, but um, as I said before, they kind of don't belong themselves. They kind of like at the mercy of circumstances, and they have to do. They kind of go to of the or they what they think is the path of the least pain. Basically, that's what they're trying to do. But the pain will come whether they go for at that like least pain pass or not. At the same time, another concerning situation in Europe are the interest rates for government debt in South European countries started to rise, and I think interest on Greek government debt rose over 5%. This is sort of upward trend. And this means that, let's say, if things continue the way they are, the that crisis, Greek crisis that was uh, pretty famous in like 2010, 2011, may come back pretty soon. And that really means that the rest of the countries in South are probably gonna sort of may experience something similar. And I mean by that, Italy, Spain, maybe Portugal. So they tend to be somewhat similar in sort of in how they how things plays out there. Now let's actually switch to the sort of Ukraine and Russia specifically. So situation in Ukraine with electricity is terrible. Essentially, at this point, there is no economy, there is no normal civilian life. It's basically survival. Um, as I mentioned, there are new estimates that about 40% of Ukrainian sort of electricity throughput or generation plus throughput through the system is down. And that really means that there are, let's say, control. Probably the best way is controlled blackouts in the country, right? For like 6, 5, 7 hours, different regions, somewhat different time. But the main idea is obviously you have availability at night and you have less availability during the day. I mean, especially evening and especially morning. That's just a pretty standard sort of situation. So again, at this point, Ukraine is totally 100% dependent on external help, and there are fears that there might be new wave of refugees from Ukraine because as winter approaches, many of these transformers that sort of or this whole system that's kind of like like leaves right now on band-aids, that those band-aids will blow up and basically the system will collapse and people will just start fleeing because many people are not prepared to survive in the conditions without electricity because it may affect also things like even gas stations, right? So things looking pretty grim on this front for uh, for Ukraine. Uh, now, oh, and there was, I think I was mentioning several days ago about gold miners in Russia that came to the government and said, okay, well, can you buy our gold so we don't lay off people? Though, so the Russian government said, no, we're not going to buy your gold. Please lay off people because we don't want to increase inflation by basically issuing more credit in circulation by buying up gold. So that's kind of their logic there. So that's what's going on in Russia. Now let's quickly walk through the front line. The situation along the state border is more or less the same. Nothing terribly new there. Now quickly jump to the North Luhansk front line. Things here also very stable, static, no really any kind of big moves. And I would say this is the front line of the lost opportunities, lost victories for Ukrainian side. I would say, and probably big luck for the Russian side. I would say. Now let's quickly jump to the North Donbass section of the front line. Things here are as any day you can open and there will be attacks towards Soledar, Bakhmut. Recently, this Bilohorivka without much success on this particular day, but it may happen, next day. So the same is straight south of Bakhmut. As you can see, Wagner mercenaries managed to kind of create this, I would even call it bridgehead or salient, and they try to sort of expand it and sort of exploit that situation, but without much success, as I said today. Now let's quickly look at central Donbass front line. Things here also, as always, the same essential attacks here, like well, I guess north of Avdiivka, you could say. Then attacks out of Pisky Selin and attacks towards Marinka. So all the same, no advances, nothing is happening there. Well, I guess it is happening, but nothing in a meaningful way. Now, quickly check Zaporizhya front line. Things here as well, extremely static. The same situation here. Now let's finish with Kherson bridgehead. Things here are quiet in terms of Ukrainian or Russian attacks. However, um, Ukrainian command, Ukrainian troops again started focusing on attacking Russian ferries, pontoon bridges, and this kind of like, let's say, like that um, gravel bridge that was kind of basically created here near the dam over that bypass channel, just basically artificially putting dumping a lot of gravel, and it goes reaches the bottom, and you're just kind of creating the bridge. So that was attacked, and then Russian sources report that there is mass evacuation going on from the western bank of Dnipro River, which is meaning the bridgehead, and that Ukrainian troops attacked one of the pontoon bridges and did a lot of damage. So I would say the speculative what is going on is it's not civilian. It's very high probability, very high chance that Russian troops are being withdrawn from Kherson bridgehead. We'll find out when uh, later, maybe or maybe not, but there is a very high probability that what's happening is withdrawal of the Russian troops under disguise that this is evacuation of the civilian from there. Oh, and then one last news that I forgot to mention: Ukrainian command or general staff started talking about the potential attack from Belarus in the sort of this western sector. And obviously, the idea of the attack is to essentially cut off this, most western part of Ukraine from the rest and block um, transport, transportation of the Western equipment, Western weapons to the rest to the actual Ukrainian troops on the front line. Uh, I would say this is probably extremely improbable scenario, just because we discussed many times Belarus army is small, and majority of it is not willing sort of to fight and die because simply there's nothing in it for people in Belarus, and there is no kind of clear logic. Okay, why are you going to go and die? And so uh, and then there was, I mentioned this before, the number of Belarus troops that are sort of ready and potentially can be used again for in aggression is about 10 to 15,000 people. So that's pretty much nothing, I would say. So that it's not possible with that number of troops to sort of cross to cut Ukraine, and also the number of Russian troops there is still small. So this is maybe they observe some kind of build up, quick build up, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense because you really need again, you know, like 300,000 troops to successfully execute on this strategy of cutting, basically splitting Ukraine in this most western part and the rest of it. You really need really in hundreds thousand because first of all you need to reach, here Romanian border, and then you need to maintain uh, this line from from one side of the country to another, and it's just you need a lot of soldiers on the ground, a lot of perfect supply. It's very unlikely that Russia is sort of capable of doing at this point. That's it for today. It was a short video. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow.